So I had a bit of a moral dilemma today. I wanted to get a video out on this important topic of families, but I've had a lot going on and today just got past me. And so I'm at that time of the day where usually I go for a bit of a stroll down to the park, and I was trying to toss up whether I put that off to do the video or whether the video had to give way for my run. So after much serious consideration about it, I thought, you know what, I'm a 21st century Renaissance man, I've got a camera and I can run with it. So I thought, why not kill two birds with one stone? As I'm running down the park, I'll start this video, and when I get there, we'll have a bit more of a chat about some issues relating to moving with a family to another country. It's something I wanted to talk about for a long time, obviously close to our hearts, but something that I think everyone needs to think about when they're moving, whether it's just as a couple or with children. There's a lot of things that need to be considered. Sometimes it's not so apparent until you've done it. And the more that we talk about it, perhaps the more that we can put things in place or maybe do a bit of planning just to avoid some of the obstacles. Because when it comes to moving, if there's 4 people in the family, well, that's 4 individual worlds that are going on, 4 individual perspectives, 4 individual challenges that are going on simultaneously. And sometimes we don't take that into account. Sometimes we move and don't sufficiently think about that, and someone gets left behind. Hopefully not literally, but definitely in terms of their ability to get on in the country and to embrace it, their new home. Sometimes you do see people who come here with families, some of them thrive and some of them don't. So I think it's just worth talking about. We've had a lot of revelations in our own family. So come along on my little run as I head to Qroo Park. I usually go a lot faster than this. I'm just going slow so that you can see all the scenery, but just be assured that usually I get up a blistering rate of knots. Man, those hills really sneak up on you, but hey, nothing for this old tank. Just keep on trucking on. This is the main park in Qroo, and in any time now this gets descended on by legions of Qroopians who are just looking to keep themselves in shape. And it's really quite cool any day of the week. It really swells here, and yeah, there's a lot of people out just keeping themselves busy, which is nice to see. So, as I said earlier, I just wanted to talk about the issue of families moving to a new country, in this case, Paraguay, but this is for anyone moving to any country. And when I say families, I'm thinking about people with children, but also absolutely just couples, people who are coming with their husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend. They're a family as well. And I think most of the issues that I'm going to talk about relate to any variation of what you would consider to be a family. So what we've noticed more frequently than not is that when people come with children, they face particular issues, challenges, hurdles, particularly with obviously their children. And this is near and dear to us because we have kids ourselves, so we've been through it. So I guess we've got a bit more of an eye for it than maybe some people who have come alone. But suffice to say, I don't know of any families that move to another country without having at least some issues that they've got to face, big or small. The first thing that I would say to anyone who's thinking about moving with kids is to ask the question, hola, muy bien, is what age are the children? Because it's absolutely my opinion, based on many families that I've seen relocate to other countries, that the sweet spot, the best age to move when it comes to children is between that toddler age to maybe pre-teenage. That age is the sweet spot and ideal for so many reasons, not the least of which is their capacity to adapt to a new country. When you're that age, as long as you're well fed, you've got mum and dad around, you're safe and secure and you can get a good sleep at night and maybe have your favourite toy, you're good to go usually. So we see that younger families seem to do really well, particularly healthy families or families that have got children outside of maybe the baby years, because I guess when you've got babies there's all sorts of other potential concerns that you might want to keep in mind. But definitely the younger children seem to fare better. But once you get into the early teenage years and going up through to the late teenage and early adult years, that's when you see all sorts of things come into play. And it's fairly predictable because it's at that age where children become very self-absorbed and self-aware of what they're doing. They go from being able to play with anyone to being very socially awkward at times and very picky. And they have all the other sort of hormonal and other youthful issues to contend with that somehow rebound back on the family in one way or another. So, so these are definitely things that straight off the bat when we're talking to anyone that's got families, that's the first question we ask is what age are they? It really is a case that there needs to be different worlds considered for each and every person in that family, because how I go about settling into a new country and how I feel about it is entirely different to the way that my teenage son or daughter would feel about it. I think that it's really important when you're moving with a family to keep it in mind that everyone's different. Everyone moves at a different rate of knots in terms of their ability to learn language, their ability to adapt to the environment, the food, the culture, the social situation, the ability to make friends. It's totally different for me than what it is for my wife, and it's totally different for us than what it is for our children. It'd be quite easy for us just to dismiss the concerns of maybe one of our kids about the issues they might be having with some sort of social situation, because we might be doing fine. But whether you're at the place where you are currently living or you're in a new country, those things remain, I guess, essentially the same. But when you move to a new country, because there's so many new dynamics and different things going on, I think sometimes it's easy for people to get lost in the cracks with all the excitement and everything going on. So you need to just be mindful and watchful of how the kids are going and how maybe they're not going, how they're adapting, and just checking in regularly. You've just got to keep in contact with them. When it comes to making relationships in new countries, well, without a fluent language, of course it's difficult. And although Paraguayans are generally lovely people, there's no country on earth where you can come in as a foreigner and just slide right in there. There can always be some sort of resistance, division, sometimes even some sort of bias or maybe even racist attitudes, and that isn't confined to any particular demographic. No country is immune from that. And I think you see that most prevalently in that adolescent age. So that's something that I would say straight off the cuff. Keep a good eye, particularly on your teenage kids. But everybody's different when it comes to the way that they deal with these issues. We have kind of got a more traditional approach when it comes to our two. We try and do what we can for them, support them, give them a sympathetic ear whenever we can and just make sure that they're okay. But at the same time, we don't over-obsess trying to create the level of normalcy that they may have had in the place that we previously came from. And we sometimes see that happen where parents come and try and overcompensate, and it becomes almost like a cotton wool effect, and it's not in a good way. I think that parents can really fall into a trap where they're more obsessed with making sure that little Billy or Sally has got all of the things that they had back home and trying to recreate that. It's never going to happen, and it more often than not will just stress everyone out. I think everyone's got their own way of doing this, and there's no single right way of parenting, but I think that you do have to be careful that you don't overcompensate as much as undercompensate. Nothing's going to be the same as what it was in the place you came from, so there's no point trying to recreate that. And ultimately, I think it can have the reverse effect. Strategies that I think that are really important that families can think about is obviously, firstly, to keep talking to them, to keep the dialogue open and keep talking about where you are, why you're there, how they're feeling about it, how you're feeling about it. And what you find is that over time, invariably, feelings change. I've had conversations with my children in recent times, and it's been a markedly different attitude about where we are now as compared to what it was even a handful of months ago, and in a positive way. So in some ways it's taken both of our children longer in some regards to embrace where we are, but as time goes on you can see the light bulb gradually flicking on, and it's my sense that it may be that generally, as we're more mature, we may be able to more readily embrace the place where we are because we have perhaps a more pronounced understanding of the benefits and reasons why we're here. But it may take our kids a bit longer, and that has been the case in our regard. But because we've been checking in with them, talking to them regularly, and just keeping up that line of communication, we've been able to monitor that so that they're not falling into some sort of hole that we're not aware of. The other thing that we personally employ, and again, this is really up to us, and I think it makes us outliers in this world, is we don't allow them to do much video gaming. I know that's a pretty radical approach, but that's something that we find really helps us keep connected with them. And neither of our kids go disappearing for hours on end into that video gaming space. If they were video gaming here, because they have fewer social connections and fewer avenues to get out and about, I think that could be a real trap. So thankfully for us, we haven't had to contend with that, which has been a plus as far as we're concerned. The other thing that I think is really important when you have particularly teenage kids is to keep opening their minds as to why you are where you are and the benefits and opportunities that it presents. Because as your children move into teenage years, they start to think about their future. Particularly, one of our children in particular, they keep in contact a lot with people back in the place where we previously lived. So they're comparing themselves, and some of their friends are thinking about doing this and that and something else. So there is that time where your kids get to where they're thinking about their future. And when you're in another country, it could be tempting for children to look at it and go, well, what's in it for me? What am I doing here? I'm missing out. What we often remind our kids about is that they've had the opportunity to come to a part of the world they would never otherwise have experienced. And that's not just a nice thing to do. With their acquisition of the language and their experience of a South American country, this has opened literally a different part of the world of opportunities for them. In Paraguay, there's relatively few people that can speak fluent English and Espanol. It's a developing country. It stands to reason that if things keep going on this current trajectory, kids are in potentially a brilliant position if they should decide to stay here in Paraguay. When they have fully mastered Espanol and they are fluent in English, they will be in a position in this country where they'll be able to speak on that level, and there'll be no shortage of opportunities for people that will be able to do that when they reach the time where they're looking to get into the workforce. Already we see opportunities, really significant opportunities for people who can speak both languages. It's developing all the time, and anyone that can speak fluent English and Espanol, together with a real understanding of the cultures of the Western world and these South American countries, well, the sky's the limit. So what we always try and do is explain to our children that this isn't just a cool thing to do. It presents opportunities for them that they otherwise never would have been able to access. And of course, they can always go back to where they've originally come from if they so choose. But at least they were given the opportunity to come and experience a different part of the world and to be able to access that part of the world that otherwise just would have been a mystery to them. The other thing that we often say to our children, if ever they're sort of expressing feelings that maybe they don't know whether this will be their long-term future, is we openly say to them, this may not be your ever place. You might be here with us for a number of years, but when you decide to, you might decide to go and either settle in another country or try another country, go back to where we came from. You're not locked in here. And I think as soon as you explain that to them, it's a bit of a pressure relief, because when you're at that age, sometimes it can feel like forever that you're going to be here or in this situation. I remember when I was in my teenage years, it felt like I was forever going to be stuck in that in-between space and you'd never get on with life. And that can really play on kids' minds when they're in a different country with their parents and making their way. So it's really important to explain to them that, hey, this is the way it is now. As far as myself and my wife are concerned, this is where we want to stay. But that doesn't mean that when our children are old enough that they have to stay here also. The only difference is that they have far more choices than what they had before. I think it's really important to release that valve and make sure that the kids don't feel like they're stuck, because that's not a nice place to be and they don't have to feel that way. And finally, I'd just like to talk about what I believe is one of the most important elements that you'll see commonly amongst families that make a go of it in a new country. And that is that families and communities that tend to make it in the long term are those that have a very strong sense of their why. Why are they here? And a family's why or an individual's why usually comes from a shared worldview, a common worldview, and your worldview also often comes from a shared spiritual paradigm. If you think about the most successful communities here in Paraguay in terms of their longevity and their ability to go from absolute desperation to thriving, are the Mennonite communities, the Christian-based communities up in the far reaches of the country. They have an ironclad sense of why that derives from their worldview, which is obviously shaped by their spiritual paradigm. I'm not saying that this is a must, or if people don't have a spiritual paradigm that they're not going to make it, not at all. But what I am saying is that when it comes to any more than one person, a group of people, whether it be two or more, really needs some sort of cement to bind them when it comes to moving to a new country, because it's not easy. This is a long, hard road that we've chosen to move to a new country, and there's many twists and turns along the way. Many times you find yourself asking, why? Why am I doing this? And if you've got a family of four, well, that's 4 times the amount of times that the family will be asking the same question. So thankfully, at least in our case, our family has a very strong sense of our why, and it's in unison. Our children are essentially on the same page as we are in regards to why we came, what the situation was in the place that we came from, where the world's heading, and how we think this is all going to pan out. And everyone's got their own sense of that. But the more that a family or even a couple can come together on at least that, I think that's the greatest thing that a family can do in order to maximise their chances of success, of making it. Because without a combined sense of why, people might just find themselves going in different directions, sometimes without knowing it. And that can be a sad thing. It's just my observations of what I see and my open thoughts about our journey. I think everyone's got their own path that they need to find in the pursuit of where they're meant to be. But if you do find that you are moving to a new country as a family, whether it be a couple or with children, you're going to have to face these questions at some stage, because if you don't think about them, they'll probably come up and maybe bite you on the backside one way or the other. The more you can think about this issue as a family, I think the better you'll be.